So, so far we spoke about, Kubernetes. We're introducing Kubernetes, and it's important for us to understand the different flavors of Kubernetes, okay? So Kubernetes is offered as a cloud service, okay? But what if the company doesn't want to use cloud for its Kubernetes? Of course, what? We have Kubernetes as an on-prem service. So Kubernetes clusters can be fully managed or self-managed. Okay, please note this. EKS cluster is a fully managed Kubernetes offering, Kubernetes service. Okay, and it's offered by Amazon, AWS, right? Amazon Web Service. That means that if we were working on Azure, right? We are going to use what? AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service. If we were deploying our applications on GCP, what are we gonna use? We are going to use GKE for what? For Google Container Service. Okay, very, very important to understand that. Now, apart from the cloud service, we have fully managed clusters because, hey, listen, cloud is not available to everybody around the world. Okay, that's the honest truth. In Nigeria, for example, the government of Nigeria may want to use, Kubernetes, but of course, what they don't want to go on AWS because their data is going to South Africa. And Nigerians are always quarreling with South Africans on Facebook, and that can escalate. So you don't want to go and reside your data in a hostile territory, right? You want something that so therefore what? They are going to go instead with a self-managed cluster. Let's use this image. Okay. Now, so they are going to go instead with a self-managed cluster. So with self-managed clusters, we are going to use, what again? So of course what? So we are going to use, okay, got it. We are going to use okay, kubectl or what? Or we use corpse. Okay, let me talk about this now. So let's talk about EKS cluster. One second. Very very when we are recording. Makes sense. So now let's put it in YouTube thumbnail. Okay. Thumbnail for AWS or EKS presentation. Okay. I want to change this one. Okay, that's fine. So now we have EKS cluster, and I'm going to open my account as well. And okay, I'm going to show you. So EKS is, an AWS service. So this also adds to the list of services that you have used in your project in AWS. But what you will notice is that EKS is wrapped around more than 30 other services. Because what? With EKS, you have to talk about the IAM roles, IAM policies. With EKS, you're going to touch networking, okay, VPCs, subnets, private and public subnet, route tables, NAT gateways, internet gateways, right? Load balancers. EKS. So EKS is service that is consumed with other services. Okay, very, very important to understand that. You understand? So you cannot talk about, EKS without talking about the other services. And we are going to say this most importantly with what? When we start talking about, okay, using Terraform to what, to create our EKS cluster. Then, of course, what? You are going to be able to see all the other services that are involved in that. Okay, we see that. So now, so if you go to your cloud account, and of course, what? This is what? Your EKS here, your what? Your Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service. You don't have any cluster for now. So we can look at the documentation. So again, what? This is so important. Please, you have what? You have documentations like this. Okay. If you want to know about any service in the cloud, okay, one of the most reliable source of that service is what? Is the documentation. Okay? Is what again? Is the documentation. That means that if you were to write your Kubernetes cluster, blah 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 like that, right? You are going to require to understand the documentation. So we have the user guides. Okay, EKS provides instructions of using the features. Let's just see if we can access this document user guide. Okay, so important. What is EKS? See that therefore what? It says what? Amazon EKS simplifies what? Kubernetes management. Okay. Provides a fully managed Kubernetes service that what? Eliminates the complexity of operating what? Kubernetes clusters. With EKS, you can deploy applications faster with less operational overhead, scale seamlessly to changing workload demands, improve security through what? Through AWS integration and automated updates. Choose between what? Standard EKS or fully what? Automated EKS mode. That's the first one. But before we proceed, let's what? Let's also look at the Kubernetes website itself. Okay. So this is, oh sorry, yeah, this is where I stopped last time, but this is what I want to talk about. Okay, this one. Oh wait, is it it? No, 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 no. See, this is why I don't like. Yeah, so what? So this is not even it. Wow, cast AI. See that? This is why most people don't like to search things again on Google because you just search one thing and you see all the search engine optimization, right? It's coming up, right? So it's seen all kind of advertisement and okay, distraction. So this is the Kubernetes website, okay? So this is where you want to always consult updates. If the Kubernetes feature has changed, you want to come here and check anything about updates, right? You're going to see it here. See that? Versions. Okay, you can see. So of course, as at date, the Kubernetes version is 1.35. And I'm going to tell you one of the frequent tasks that we do as DevOps engineers every maximum 6 months, minimum 6 months. See, let's say August of last year, right? We had deployed 1.34. Excellent. Everything is working great. Now, what happens? Kubernetes has what? Has updated to 1.35. In cybersecurity, you learn something called patching. Okay. And if you investigate, right, look at how many companies has been hacked because they were behind on what? On patching their existing services. Kubernetes is a service, and so when what? When the provider updates, okay, and releases new version, we have to what? We also have to update. So now what? It becomes a very big task. How do you update from 1.34 to 1.35 without experiencing a downtime? So now you start hearing about what? Real interview question. How do you even plan the updates? Okay. So you're going to hear about something called change management. Okay, change management in most companies, they do have like meetings where they say, oh yeah, okay, this is Elvis from the DevOps team, DevOps lead. We plan to update Kubernetes in this environment for this client. We need authorization for that update. So therefore what? There is a change manager who is what? Who is monitoring all the changes. Know what I mean? So in the work environment, you don't just carry your koro head and go and do an update. No, right? Because what? That Kubernetes cluster is running a workload for a client or for a line of service or line of product or line of production. And what? There are stakeholders involved in that, right? So if you are going to do it, you must what? You need to submit what do you call what? A change management request. You describe what you're going to change, what client is going to be affected, how they are going to be affected. You must also what? Describe your recovery process. What if something goes wrong? How fast can we, revert back? How critical is this change? Something like updates is always what? A critical change. Because if you don't update, you start opening what? Opening your system to vulnerabilities. Because that means that Kubernetes no longer supports versions 1.31. You are at 1.31 when what? Kubernetes expects you to be at 1.35. That is going to be a problem for you. Does it make sense to everyone? Is it clear? Everybody? Right? So then that becomes so important. So you can see, so when you come, Prof, are we going to review Rancher? We are going to study Rancher again onwards. Tomorrow we are going to deploy our Rancher cluster. Okay. And okay, we'll do to go for Rancher again. So if you go to documentation, you can what? You can see why Kubernetes, what is Kubernetes, everything I've explained, you can learn more here, right? Now, your Docker desktop has what? What we call kubectl. If you want to install kubectl, see that? So this one, so this comes with Docker desktop. You can enable it. I don't know why mine was giving me issues. Desktop. So mine was giving me issues. The desktop won't even load. I think I have to kind of restart my system for it to load. But yes, of course. So you can what? You can you can learn Kubernetes from what? From your Docker desktop. Okay. I'm going to show you. If it doesn't now, tomorrow if it does, I would in fact I'll uninstall it and install it again. That's fine. Okay. And I'm going to show you how to what? How to enable your Docker desktop. I mean your Kubernetes desktop, and you can practice all the kubectl commands, no issues, no stress. The only limitation is that you cannot run production workloads on kubectl. I mean on what? On your one cluster kube ADM, you cannot do that. But the mini kube that comes with the Docker desktop, believe me, is a game changer. Okay, if you can use it, you know what? Without any hesitation, please do. Okay, so you can, go through documentation here. I'm going to put all of this, okay, in our WhatsApp group. So what we've done also is that we have what? We have decided to filter and create a group for only those, have been attending classes. So now we have a list of Lion Tech enrolled students for 2025. That's the group where you are in now. That's going to be a final group. And that's where most of our things are going to be happening because everybody here now has an ID. We know you and you know us. Okay, so this is very important, right? So this is Kubernetes as a self. Okay, so Kubernetes have cloud offerings. For the cloud offerings, you have the various cloud providers offers Kubernetes service as a service, fully managed. When we say fully managed, it just means that the control plane, the difference between self-managed and fully managed is this. The control plane is what? Is managed by the cloud provider in the case of fully managed. And in the case of self-managed, we what? The team, technical team, DevOps team what? Manages the entire cluster, the entire overhead, okay? It's managed by that. So important. I think we are also going to install kube ADM, just what? For the purposes of understanding, because they are organizations that will not, because of maybe security or data residency requirements, they will not want to use cloud. Okay, they want to what? Create for us our own cluster and manage it yourself. Okay, and of course, what? That is for security purposes. So whether it's self-managed or fully managed, the what? The process, the commands, everything remains the same. Okay. This is everyone. Are we clear? Anybody have a question so far? Everything is clear? Okay. So now what? So let's look at the EKS cluster. I think this is where we're going to end today, and then tomorrow we just going to create one using Terraform, which makes sense. Okay. So of course what? So EKS is an AWS managed what? Kubernetes service. Okay. So look at the architecture, networking, security, and operations. So what is EKS? Elastic what? Kubernetes service is what? It's AWS managed what? Kubernetes control plane. It runs upstream Kubernetes standard API tooling with what? AWS managed availability and upgrades. So what? Now, the difference when companies use EKS, like in my case, working with Polar Backbone, right, is that sometimes you're going to face a lot of difficulties with your clusters that you will require, some external support. Okay. That's why AWS have what? Support. Okay. Yeah. AWS have support. And so when companies sign up for the enterprise plan with that support, you can always reach out to the support because there are times that maybe you have a networking issue that needs to look at the control plane, but the control plane is not in your control, right? Therefore, what? You have to create a ticket and get someone to look at the control plane. That's why when AWS Kubernetes service team upgrades the Kubernetes version, they send out emails to everybody that, hey, you know what? support for this version is going to end on so and so date. This becomes a race to upgrade. Because if you don't upgrade, right, and you have issues, AWS is not going to support you on that version, right? So that's it. Very, very important. So of course, what? So EKS is designed for production clusters with what? With integrated AWS networking, IAM, load balancing, and storage. AWS networking, what services do we think of here? What services are we talking about when we hear about AWS networking? It's services. Okay, VPC, yep. And what again? Yeah. So we know of VPC. What else? Okay, VPCs, VPN, and of course in VPC we have what? We have the VPC component, right? Uh, is Ingress. Ingress is not an AWS service, so I just want to be clear. Okay, it's a completely different service. Yes, of course, what? But we use Ingress for that. You have internet gateway, load balancers. Okay, very, very important. Okay, like that. IAM. Okay. Now, IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. Therefore, what? In this case, we are what? We are going to be using IAM policies and IAM rules. And no, I don't think we're going to use IAM users, right? But we use what? We use rules and policies. Very, very important here. That's why you see IAM there. So you must what? You must know the exact services under IAM. That's how some people pronounce it. I am, okay, but it's IAM. Yeah, that's the okay. I am is still good. Yeah, okay, like that. So why DevOps teams choose EKS? It reduces what the undifferentiated heavy lifting. Okay, high availability control plane. Well, we have the highly available control plane, patching and managed upgrade. So if the DevOps team was to have their own cluster, like you manage it yourself, what it means is that what we are going to be responsible for what? For managing the control plane. And that's a difficult task, right? That's why most companies, if they're in the cloud, are what? Are or we rather go for managed clusters like this. Okay. So we have what? The standard what? Kubernetes workflows, kubectl, Helm, GitOps, CI/CD pipelines. Okay, so we are going to study GitOps. Very, very important. Okay, Argo CD. Okay, we'll study Argo CD as a deployment mechanism and technology for Kubernetes. Of course, what? Strong AWS ecosystem integration, ALB, NLB, VPC, IAM, see that EBS, EFS, and CloudWatch. It's what I was talking about, right? So AWS EKS, easily what integrates with these other services. Okay, we have what ALB. What does ALB stands for? ALB stands for what? Application Load Balancer. And NLB stands for Network Load Balancer. VPC stands for what? Virtual Private Cloud. IAM is Identity and Access Management. EBS, Elastic Block Storage. EFS, Elastic What File System. And CloudWatch. A lot of service. That's why, please do not keep your cluster running for more than 3 hours without except you have kept some money to waste. Okay, but if you have that money, please just give it to me. I have use for it. Okay, but don't do that. Very, very important. Don't do that. Okay. Now, of course, what we can also scale from small environments to enterprise multi-team platforms. Okay, you can scale up your EKS cluster just how you want it. Now, this is where you need to understand what I was talking about earlier, right? Shared responsibility. So when you deploy an EKS, and this is so important because now if you are facing permission issues that are coming from the Kubernetes control plane, it's no big deal. Just what? Come to the Scrum meeting in the morning and say, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, yesterday was a good day as we're trying to troubleshoot the continuous issues that we're having in dev for client A, B, C, D, and we found out that the issue we have concerns the Kubernetes control plane. This is controlled by AWS. Late last night, I raised a ticket with AWS, and I'm going to continue to follow up with them to get a resolution sometime today. Why? Because the EKS control plane, the Kubernetes control plane is managed by AWS. So only them can do an update on that. So instead of saying, oh, I was working on this, and it's not going, I was working on that, and it's not going, I was working on that, only for a junior engineer or maybe a developer to say, oh, yeah, you are facing that because this is managed by AWS. Like, oh, okay, I did not know. Like, but who taught you Kubernetes? Right? So place is so important, right? When we set up our own Kubernetes cluster, we manage the control plane as well as the worker nodes. But in the case of the cloud offerings, this is the same for AKS and GKE, right? Is what? This is managed by, okay, by what? The control plane is managed by Kubernetes. Very, very important. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead. So of course, what the control plane that we've seen in the architecture is what the Kubernetes control plane contains what the API server, okay, the control plane, okay, for what? For scaling across what multiple AZ for high availability. We're going to see this. This is so important, okay? And what control plane patching is managed by AWS. And of course, what high availability, let's say you are deploying in Nigeria, but what you want to spread across east, west, and south. Therefore, what the control plane in that particular scenario is going to be in charge there. Then, of course, what do we manage? What you manage the worker node, what the easy to what manage node groups or self-managed Fargate, add-ons like CNI, core DNS, kubectl, okay, and what again? And CSI drivers, workload, rollback policies, security postures, and what? And cost control. So this becomes your own responsibility. EKS architecture overview, we've already seen this, right? It's Kubernetes, and it's the same for all the offerings, be it Azure, EKS, or whatever. Again, what? You have the control plane and you have the data plane or whatever you can call it, like your compute or the worker node. And in this case, what is control plane for fully managed service, what managed by AWS, and this is managed by. This is so important because don't go for an interview and say, "Oh, we are running EKS, and I am responsible for managing the control plane, and I'm managing this one." I'm like, no, no, no. Okay, they're just going to kick you out. All right, because what? So this is important. If you see me belaboring on this, is because it's quite important. Okay. So provisioning options, you can, okay, so now this is how we what? How do we provision our EKS cluster? We can use what? We can use, EKS control. EKS control is supported by what we call cloud formation. AWS cloud formation is a specific IAC2 infrastructure as code service that is provided by AWS, okay? So we can use EKS control, fast start ID for training, and PO stand for what? What does PO stand for? POC stands for proof of concepts. Terraform is what? It's preferred for production governance and repeatability. console manual, not recommended for repeatable environments. So what we are saying is that, of course, you can. So you can come here and say, okay, you want to go and create a cluster. Create one. There you go, right? This is going to complicate your life, if not your destiny. Never do it this way, okay? Everything should be IAC. All right? Networking on EKS, the VPC fundamental, of course, what? EKS cluster runs in your VPC. Nodes are ES2 instances in subnet. Amazon VPC, Sena what assigns the VPC IPs to port. Then we have what? We have the VPC networking, and then the plan IP capacity, port density, subnet sizes, and cluster growth. Choose your endpoint, access model early, private, production, public for labs. Okay, so this is so important. What this means is that because we are using the cloud offering, right? We have the CNI. Okay, we're going to see this. Okay, when we create a cluster, we are going to see all these features. So it's important to talk about it as well. Ingress and load balancers on EKS, so important, right? So now we have our workloads. We have the applications, the containers are running in the clusters, right? How do we balance the load? What I'm talking about is I want to believe that you are imagining an application with, let's say, an app that has about 2 million traffic or transactions per hour, right? Like PayPal, WhatsApp, Facebook, right? And all of that. So this is so important for you to understand. Okay. So therefore what? EKS is going to what? It's going to integrate very seamlessly with what? With AWS load balancer. And of course what? So it can either be an ALB or NLB. Now, this is so important. When do we use ALB and when do we use NLB? This is often a question that, infrastructure teams needs to make, or a decision, right? That they have to make. Question we have to answer, right? There is a difference between application load balancer and network load balancer. We are going to have a class on this because it's important, right? Um, which one should you choose and when and why? It matters a lot, okay? Now, still with ingress and load balancing, we have what? We have the TLS option, okay? ACM, ALB, NLB, in cluster ingress control termination. Very, very important. Now, I hope you know that every traffic leaves its source as HTTP, which is unsecured and unencrypted. And of course, what? At some point, it's supposed to, translate or transform into what? Into HTTPS. In AWS, the service that secures endpoints, okay? This is so important is what? Is ACM. What does ACM stands for? what? AWS Certificate Manager. So if you go on so many websites and you see this lock, let me show you, right? Very, very important. I guess we'll look at this also when it comes to traffic security and all of that. See this lock here? This means something, right? It means something. So when you have this, it tells you that this site has an SSL certificate. One of your tasks at work in the working environment is what? Is updating your SSL certificate, right? This certificate expires, in fact, it has an expiration period, right? Sometimes it expires after a year. So what? Companies buy SSL, right? You can buy for 10 years. You can buy, so some just buy for 6 months, 1 year. So at some point, what happens? the endpoint is going to become unsecured because the SSL is about to expire. And of course, that ticket comes back to you. Imagine if you click on facebook.com and it turns out to be unsecured. Are you even going to proceed? Right? You will not. Because what? Now, the browser has been so configured in a way that when you hit on an unsecured or a suspicious website, you are automatically informed. So imagine that, tomorrow you hit on Facebook and you are told that this Facebook site is unsecured, and Chrome cannot guarantee that the data you are going to input here is secured and all of that, right? So there is something we call SSL termination. And of course, what this is made possible with ACM. And ACM stands for Amazon Certificate Manager. Okay. And of course, what? It works with domain. So when you buy a domain name, you can buy what? ACM. Then what? You can automatically attach the ACM on the domain. And the domain naming service in AWS is what? Is Route 53. So, and I think AWS have kind of, tightened the process to buying a domain name on AWS now is even more difficult to buy a domain name. Your account must have existed for a while. You need to kind of like give justifications why you. So don't be surprised that you would not be able to buy a domain name if your account maybe is less than 6 months. Okay, you may not be able to buy a domain name. That I can guarantee you that, right? Like that. So, Ben, you can what? Yeah, light sail. Also, light sail has a very different objective. Okay, it's not the same as domain name. Light sail offers you a server that you can easily deploy applications in. Okay, normal light sail like that. Service I've not really used. I used it once on a project and I never used it again. Right. So this when you hear about Route 53, right? This is it here. So you can see if you have a domain, you can what? You can create domains here. You can buy a domain name. Let's say what? I want to buy a domain name, just what? Go through this process. Like I said, it's quite complicated at the moment. Right? But you can see I have a domain here. And this I bought, I think, sometime last year. That's why I don't joke with this account because it contains some stuff. And so you see, like, if you look at most of the endpoints that you have, for example, if you look at what? If you look at this one, right? So when you click on this attendance form, it says what? Demo what? Demoapps.com. So this is the domain we are using from. So what? This application is hosted where? Is hosted on AWS. I'm not paying shit for this. I'm not paying a dime for this. Why? Because of my knowledge in tech. So this is where you're also acquiring the skills because then you can do things for yourself that you will have otherwise hired a developer or get the projects. They'll tell you, oh, we need to buy the domain name. It's 100,000 francs. Okay, great. Buy it. You know what I mean? Like that. But, you need to. Okay, next problem here. I don't know what is funny. It is not funny at all. This is wrong. Okay, this is so dismissive. This is so misleading. Where I am right now is about it's minus what? Let me see what berry weather. Uh Mr. Mbuna, how is the weather for you guys in the state? I know you guys are going to be under winter storm, right? Oh boy. See that? We are what? We are at minus 16. I don't know what's the temperature of your freezer. I don't know if you in Cameroon has freezers, right? We are what? We are at minus 16 here. Okay. That will tell you that, some of us just wants to come back home. See that? Because this kind of suffer, right? And you can see if you go to the image, the winter images here, winter what? Winter 2026, okay? Accidents and road conditions. Let me show you, okay, in what? In Toronto, for example. Go to images here, you can what? See that? This is our roads as of last week. Look at this here. This is an accident that happened somewhere on Eloro Forest. Okay. When it's winter in this country, we forget how to drive. Like, so there is one of you here who just traveled to Manitoba, and then I think he wrote me yesterday, and I was like, the properties go to Manitoba. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, how you enjoying it? But I said, oh boy, I wasn't told. He said they told me, but I thought they were exaggerating. I was like, okay, they were actually exaggerating. You get that? So this is what it is here. You can see, like, it's crazy, right? It's always good to check. So on the 15th, we had what? We had a snowstorm, okay? A very bad one to begin with. And we have one more that's coming this weekend, between today and tomorrow and Monday. We're going to have even a more severe. So please, if you're praying, pray for us, okay? Especially for those in America. Okay, I don't know how we got to that area, but if you are following well, Abby. Okay, all right. So we have what? Just on EKS. You're gonna see when I know they use it. We have what? You can see we have, all of that. Okay. Now storage integrations. We have, guess what? CSS driver that blocks storage for stateful set applications. So when we come to stateful set, right, you're going to see there are applications that need data and need volume, like what, like databases. Okay, if you deploy like MongoDB or Redis, it requires all of that. And then we have what? We have the S3 is what's an object storage integrated at app level, not a POSIX volume by default. You can use storage class organization, encryption default, and performance tiers. Storage in, so therefore what? The same EKS is what? Because we are going to see this in real time. So it's good for you to understand that, okay? Then we have what? For security, there is, IAM for what? For, IAM what? I this map to Kubernetes RBAC. Now, what is RBAC? It's a very, very important aspect in Kubernetes. It stands for role-based access control. Very, very important. This is how we manage access control in the Kubernetes cluster, and also enforces the concepts or the process of what? Of authorization and authentication. I hope you know that those two are not the same, right? Authorization is not the same as authentication. So you could be authenticated to the cluster, but you're not authorized to roll back a deployment. You're not authorized to scale a deployment. You're not authorized to change a deployment, right? That's authorization. So all of that we are going to implement using RBAC. Of course, we can add guardrails, namespace, quotas, admissions, policies. What it means is that I can grant Daniel access to my cluster, but I limit him only to the test namespace, for example. That means that anywhere else outside that namespace, he cannot do anything. That's guardrails. And that's where namespaces comes in the picture. Do you understand what we're talking about here? Is it clear? Right? Great. And then we have quotas, admission policies like that. Then we have, core add-ons that you must operate. You have core DNS, kubeproxy, VPC, CNI, CSR drivers, and observability. We're going to see all of this, okay, real time tomorrow when we create our first cluster. know you guys don't like me talking too much sometimes, because talking too much too is not too good. But I think that's what I've signed up for. Okay. Scaling patterns, HPA, scale pod based on CPU, memory, and custom metrics. Carpenter, cluster autoscaler, scales node based on what? Scheduling demand. So we have cluster autoscaler, which is so important. That's why most companies and most teams are advocating for cloud, cloud Kubernetes offering, right? Because what it comes with all of this auto scaling. So what now we have scaling at two levels, at the application level and what? And at the infrastructure level. We're going to see this in action, and it's so important for you to understand. Manage node groups, what? Scaling policies for steady workloads, right size request limit to make scaling what? Accurate and cost effective. Very, very important. Okay, upgrades. So we're going to see this as we come on. That's it for our EKS introduction.